Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey, Dream Drivers. Welcome to episode 51 of the Dreams and Drive No Parking Podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Alisia Dale, who's the author of the Cellar Blue series, which is inspired by her fun-filled childhood days living in a suburb of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Alisia describes herself as a mom, wife, sister, daughter, lawyer, and author who's a native of Canada, has lived in the USA, and currently resides in Europe. Yes, you guys, Dreams and Drive is going international. Alisia is a lover of language and communication. She speaks 4 languages and has lived in 8 different countries. So can you guys say wow? Because I know I was saying wow, just learning so much about her and her journey. And it was so fun chatting with Alisia because I'm not sure if I mentioned this in previous episodes, but when I was a child, I always wanted to be an author of some sort. I was always writing my own storybooks, coloring them, and of course trying to sell them to people. But it was so great to hear Alisia talk about how she was able to put those dreams of hers literally in drive, and how she now has created her own book series geared towards children called Cellar Blue. In this episode, we talk about how Alisia's love for entrepreneurship evolved from youth to adulthood. We talk about the art of storytelling, how to write, market, and publish your own book series. So if there's any authors listening in, you guys will definitely benefit from the advice that Alisia shares. Alisia also talks about why it's important to own your intellectual property. So this is where her background as a lawyer comes in handy. Alisia also talks about the best choice that she has made in her business to date, how to move through and beyond your ideas, because sometimes we can get stuck at a point in our dream driving journey, and she talks about how to move through those challenges and move through those points in time in our experience. And one of the things that I really love about our whole conversation was Alisia reflecting on a surprising lesson she has learned about herself. You guys know that I love talking about self-development, personal development, so that was a really great point in our interview. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to send you guys a reminder to make sure if you're listening in on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you're getting our episodes every week. I want to make sure that you don't forget about Dreams and Drive, so just hit subscribe and make that easy for yourself. If you want today's show notes, all you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 51. If you want to join our Dreams and Drive community, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. Last but not least, don't forget to follow us on social. We're at Dreams and Drive across the board: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Find us, engage. I love to comment back, tweet back, do all that stuff. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and make sure you share this one with a friend. Hi, Alisia. Thank you so much for being a guest today on Dreams and Drive. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much, Raina, for having me. I really appreciate it.
I can't wait for our dream drivers to hear all about Cellar Blue and what you're doing with that project. But before we go into anything, I love to open up our interviews with the question, what inspired you as a child? So if I had to say who was Alisia, the child, the 8-year-old, how would you respond?
Well, I think that Alisia has always been a dreamer. Much like the listeners you have, who listen to your podcast on a regular basis. I think really, it sounds really strange, but really it was the sky. It was knowing that there were no limits, no boundaries. And I spent a lot of time as a little girl looking up and watching the air move, and wondering where it was going to and where the clouds led to. And I think that's always been, my fascination of the knowing that there was, there were no limits and where that could take you and where that could take me. And I lived on a street where the end of the road was not actually finished, and it led into a field. And many a days, my sisters and I, we sat there and we dreamed of being wherever it was on the other side. And it didn't necessarily mean a country or a place. We actually thought of a different universe, another world. So our fantasy and our imagination took us to different places. And I think that is what has always been the bedrock of my inspiration.
And when you were younger, what did you imagine you would be doing when you grew up?
Oh, many things, believe me. I've been a dancer all my life, so I always thought I would be a ballet dancer. I thought I was going to be a singer. I think I thought I would be all the traditional things that many girls think that they're going to be. And I love the creative, and so I was always inspired by doing something creative. But on top of that, I also was a very early let's say, initiator and very much inspired by the world of entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurial world. And I had my first business at the age of 8, because I took a babysitting course at the Red Cross, and I decided to become a babysitter.
At 8?
Yeah, I know, but you don't get a lot of clients at 8. So my first client was my neighbors, the Pattersons, and they had a dog, and they were going on vacation. So, I was in charge of Toby. But you know what? It was a job, and I was really happy to have it, and it taught me the responsibility of owning my own business and having to take care of another animal. And actually, it is one of the episodes that we write about, that I will be writing about in the Cello Blue series. Cello Blue also opens her own babysitting business, and her first client is a dog. So there you go. A lot of the inspiration for the stories that I have for this series come from my own childhood, and it was absolutely a wonderful experience. But that did actually grow into a real babysitting business. And I had several clients, and as I got older and we moved, I turned my babysitting business into a little daycare.
Oh wow!
So you see, these are the little things, and it doesn't mean that it had to be something over the top or whatnot, but it was that sense of being able to create your own stream of revenue at a very young age. That plus macrame. I sold hangers.
Hangers?
I would cover hangers with material, and I would sell them during the Christmas season. Macrame, I would make arts and crafts, and I would go door to door and knock on doors and sell my arts and crafts. And I think knowing your neighborhood and knowing your audience, knowing your clients, I would make things specially for people, knowing who they were, and I would prepare all these things, at the end of summer and the beginning of fall. So I started very, very young, wanting and desiring basically to have my own business.
That's amazing. So how did that entrepreneurial spirit in you evolve as you grew older?
Oh boy, I've had many jobs in my day. I think it just continued in drips and drabs. It's not something that happened, with one big idea. It's small things that I would be involved in. Sometimes it was working with other friends, in a project that they had, or it was taking something and seeing if that would work. And then eventually, I think, an idea sticks. My sister would say, she's like, boy, oh boy, you've had many ideas over the years. And then some of them just really, they just nail it. And I think you just have to keep on looking for that, for that project that works. And I've been lucky not only to be able to see Sella come to life, put it this way. But I'm working on another project that also, will launch next year in 2017. So it seems like, it's full steam ahead, full throttle.
So I know in your bio you talk about how you are a traveler, right? And you're someone who likes to
Yes.
experience the world. Can you kind of talk to us and maybe talk to us about how travel and seeing the world as a magical place has kind of inspired you to launch this children's book series, Cellar Blue?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I have been fortunate enough now to have lived in 8 different countries, and that was, I think, like I just said in the opening, it started right from the very beginning of looking at and through those fields and wondering where the end actually was, if there actually were to be an end, and I never thought of it as that. I always thought that there was something there, and it was there that I wanted to go. And I think once you project that and you put that out in the universe, you don't know that you're actually you're creating your own destiny. And that plus the desire to communicate with people and to understand who they are and to understand their stories and their history and what moves them, you learn to speak. And I've learned 4 different languages so that I can speak to as many people as I can and as I could when I lived in those countries. Because the one thing I refused to do was to move to a country and not learn the language.
Mm-hmm. What languages do you speak?
So French, English, German, and Italian.
Oh, fluently?
Fluently, yes.
Oh, bonjour, mademoiselle. Oui. I can speak Spanish.
Un poquito de español también. But the point is that the art of retelling a story you learn from children, and children are the best storytellers. And I think that is why, when I decided that I was going to pen my stories for my children, and that's exactly how it happened. It was the desire, once my children got to an age where they can ask me about my life, my childhood, that I thought, gosh, they they deserve to know who I was before I became their mom. Mm-hmm. And this is the reason why the stories evolved. And it started off very differently to how it has ended up today. But it started from that spark of inspiration to be able to have a story to tell my own kids. Cellar Blue is a 6-year-old girl growing up in her musical village outside of a city which we know is Montreal, but it's not mentioned in the book. But the town is called Chateauguay, and she grows up in the musical village where all the streets in her village are named after musical composers. And we meet Stella at the age of 6, and the 14-book series will see her, become engaged in many different episodes, but she doesn't ever change from being the sweet and whimsical, perky 6-year-old that we meet in the first book. Only that we get to know her a lot more, her family, her friends, her village, all of whom and all of which make up and become part of the Cellar Blue narrative. And she is sweet and kind. She is ordinary yet extraordinary, because really she is the quintessential girl next door, living her life in an ordinary way, doing what ordinary kids do. And I think what is wonderful about Cellar Blue is that we get to see for the first time, and I believe really in picture book, children literary works, a child, a protagonist of color portrayed in a very positive and very ordinary way. She's not magical. She doesn't do anything outside of what any other 6-year-old should be able to do or should be asked to do. She's just living her life and experiencing it as any child should. And I think that's fabulous.
So will all the books in the series, is she 6-year-old in all the books, or will she grow
She
up with
is. She
us?
remains. No, she doesn't grow up. She remains 6 years old throughout the 14 book series. Yes.
So why
I
was...
mean, think about it.
Mhm.
Does Dora grow up throughout her series?
No.
Does Dr. Stuffins? Does Sophia the first? And this is why I think it's really important that Stella remain a character that children can identify with, and she's there as a staple character with a narrative that all children who reach that age will now be able to experience her in that form, and that's why she remains as many iconic characters do in one state throughout the series.
Why was writing Stella's story so important to you?
Well, like I said, I think it was more important for my kids. It was to give them a sense of who I was when I was growing up. Kids are very different today. I mean, and I see that every day with my children, who are fairly young, um, and their world revolves around the use of technology, the internet. While our world, at least my world, revolved around a totally different era, a totally different time where digital technology was not the focus. And, in my kids' world, the fact that we didn't have a mobile phone or we didn't have a laptop or an iPad, they just wonder, what is it that you actually did when you were a kid? Could not have been, you could not have been having fun, mommy, is what they want to tell me and what they have told me, and my husband, by the way. But the point is that childhood was very different. It was much simpler back there. And I think I just wanted them to understand that, that was a time not so far along, well, not so far, it's not so long ago and not that far away, that this is how kids live their life. So that was really, one of the reasons I wanted them to have this understanding of how the world worked, before the digital era.
What were their reactions to it when they finally got to read the book, or when the book was read to them? Mm-hmm.
The children have not only had the book read to them upon completion, but they have been instrumental in the writing of the book, which has been amazing for me to be able to experience that with my children. I use them as my first critics, and boy, oh boy, they're harsh. If they don't like something, it's like, Mom, wah, that's not gonna work. Don't write that. Don't say that. And the whole thing about Stella Blue and this book, which is actually Stella Blue and the First Day of School, is actually the third book in the series, but the first book to be published. The children were just absolutely in awe of any kid who was that excited for her first day of school. Because my twins, the boys, told me there is no one on the planet that would be that excited for school, because we certainly were not. So the whole thing for them was just, incredulous that it could have been that exciting for anybody to want to go to that place, as they would call it, So, they're great. They're great critics, and they're great supporters of the series, and they really do put their 2 cents in. So it's actually a lot of fun to be able to work through this project with them.
So let's take it back a little bit. Let's talk about the process of writing a book and having a book series. I think a lot of our dream drivers listening in who might be writers, they might have their own aspirations to one day publish their own books. What was the first thing that you had to do when you first came up with the concept for the Stella Blue character and the series?
Oh, first thing you have to do is write it, because a lot of times it stays in one's head. And I'm learning that more and more as I speak to people, or people meet you. And the first thing they tell you is, I've written a book. or I'm planning on writing a book. So everyone is a secret author, in another time, in another life. So I think the first thing is you actually have to write it. And then the next thing is, well, what do I do once I've written it? How do I get it published? How do I move beyond just the writing? And that's the real, I think that's the real scary part. Look, it's not easy to go out there and expose your creative idea to people. And believe me, it's certainly not easy to get the umpteen rejection letters from publishers that you are bound to get, unless, of course, you're J.K. Rowling or someone who doesn't go through that. But I know she did as well. So it is perseverance, and also I think it's just understanding that your work has a place and it has a voice. Not everyone publication house or publishing house is right for your work, and I think you really have to do your work and trying to get it to those people whose vision or whose voice mimics what you've created, and that's the biggest challenge. And you can stumble upon the right house immediately, or you may have to just continue until you find that right house. And then the other route, of course, is to create your own house, if that's what you need to do. And I think that this is now what most people are doing. And I think that it's a great platform that we have now, because this industry is changing dramatically, like many industries that we see, where, the digital age has unleashed upon us the ability to be able to release people from the traditional, lockstep way of doing and producing creative work. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for people to go out and be their own drivers, and that's really important.
So you decided to go with a publishing house, right?
Well, I decided to go with a publishing house that I am also part owner in, and so that has helped to bring about this series. And they actually decided they wanted to take this forward. So that was, I think, for me, really important, and to have the opportunity. And this is what I think is really key here, to own my own IP. Because Cello Blue, to me, is not just this book series, it's a brand. And that's exactly what we're building. We're building a brand. And owning the IP to the brand is what, really intrigued me. And as a lawyer, I know the importance of owning your own rights, and as an artist.
So an IP, for people who may not be familiar with it, can you describe what that is?
Well, that's your intellectual property. So basically, owning the name Cello Blue, trademarking the name Cello Blue, owning the images, of the Blue series. So all the images, the name, these are all rights that are owned by me, the author, under a separate company. And that means, we will have the opportunity in the future to license the use of the name or the images, if we choose, to companies that may, wish to market our products.
Okay, yeah.
And that you'll get when you're an author who just then signed your creative rights away to the publishing house. Those rights become theirs, and you lose all control to the intellectual property.
So would you recommend that people try to go the independent route if they can? Because there are upsides to working with a bigger publishing company.
Definitely upsides. Of course, and this is something that we're seeing now. Of course, there's the distribution, especially in the picture book. In the picture book world, distribution is key. And if you're able to have a distribution and supply chain, logistics chain, that is, that in itself is worth, its weight in gold. But it all depends, I think, on the project that you have. And I think you need to understand your project and what you want from it. Like I said, my ultimate goal is a brand, which means that the stories are a platform and the catalyst to brand exposure, which is very different from somebody who is an author, an artist who is really interested only in the creative, in the writing, and not the other parts of the business. So if you want to write and you want somebody to, to publish your writing, then you should probably just go to a publishing house. But if it's more than just the writing that you're interested in, then I think it really is incumbent upon you to, and probably worth your while to look into more of the strategic corporate business side of what you're wanting to do with your work, with your artistry.
So another thing that you mentioned that I think is very important, and it's something that we often talk about on the show, is the importance of knowing your target audience. Who would you say your target audience is? Is it the parents of the children, or is it the children themselves?
I think both. Exactly. You nailed it. Definitely gatekeepers. I mean, because when you're 6, of course, even before the age of 6, children are picking up books all the time and looking at sparkly pictures and things that move, et cetera, and so forth. But this is really a story that I think is captivating for parents who grew up in this, obviously at a different time than their children, and who may see a lot of themselves in this character. So, our the gatekeepers for sure: moms, dads, grandmas, aunts, uncles, godparents, teachers, definitely. And we've seen it, when we were on tour, when I was on tour, this summer in the States. We would go to book fairs and whatnot, and immediately grandmothers, moms of, like I said, of young children, moms of children of color, parents, would be completely captivated by this imagery and by this character. And then the kids themselves, once they've had the book, and what is so intriguing about the artwork is that every time, and you wouldn't believe how many times I've looked at this book, Cherie is so fantastic in what she does as an illustrator, is that I see something new that I didn't see before every time I pick up the book.
Yeah, I was going to mention, even just going on your website,
detail.
Yes, and all the... in everything. Yeah. So she designed the images for the book, and then did she also design special images for the site, or are these pulled from book images?
No, these are pulled from all of her work that she has done so far for the company.
Okay.
Yeah, so exactly.
How did you go about finding Cherie, your illustrator?
Well, I think that Cherie was not the original artist and the original illustrator on this work, and it was just again through. And I think this is when you know that a project is born. It's born through its own lucky star. It's born because there's a bigger force out there that wants it to come through. I just feel like I'm the conduit. I'm not the owner of Cellar Blue. I'm not the owner of this series. It's a stronger force. It's a bigger force than I am. But so I'm the conduit through which it has come. I was working with a wonderful design team, and it was through the owner of the design team who had spotted Cherie's work on another project that she was working on, and came to me literally in the ninth hour and said, "Look, I really think you need to look at this person's work." And, and I said, "Come on, this is, we're just about to go to press. There's no way she's like, I'm telling you, you need to talk to her at least. And so I said, okay, I'll set up a meeting and we'll have a chat. And, at that time I was living in the Middle East, Cherie's in Toronto. And, I said to her, well, look, if you can draw me what you feel Stella Blue represents or is to you, with some background pictures of me when I was a child, my daughter. And when I got these images back, I mean, it was absolutely breathtaking that we did have to say, you know what, stop the press. We're going to redo. And I think that was the best choice we've ever made.
Was that a significant investment that you had to make? So I'm pretty
Oh
sure
my
that
God.
you put a lot of money into that, right?
Absolutely. Game changer, for sure. But I think, again, it was one of those things that, now looking back in hindsight, I am so happy that, this opportunity came along and we did not turn our back to something that has completely changed changed the outlook of how things are going to be going forward. Absolutely.
So on the whole idea of branding, the original name for your main character was Stellar Blue, right?
Yes, Stella.
Why did you change it, or what was that thinking behind the change?
Well, Stella was, again, she was going to be this character. I think she was sort of going to be like an alter ego character or personality of me. She was supposed to, be this, this girl who could, who could do several things, and she was there to inspire her neighborhood and rid the neighborhood of evil. She was going to be stellar. She was going to be above the fray. She was not, and that's all and wonderful and great, but I just don't know how relatable she would have been to most children. I mean, of course, if I were writing in the genre of, of comic fiction, mm-hmm. It would have been a great, sort of superhero, a superpower figure. But I think what happened is I started off on that with those ideas in mind, and the more I wrote, the more it became apparent that she was just supposed to be a little girl. And so I was going to go with Stellar Blue, and it just, I think there's always a sense of, what will market better and what rings better. And my daughter's middle name is Sella. Her name is Marincella. And all of a sudden I said, well, why am I, forcing something that seems so obvious if we just call her Stella Blue? And I think that just rings so beautifully well. It's musical, actually. And and that's how it changed.
I always think it's so, I think a lot of times people don't realize how transformative or all the transformations that happen during the creative process, but how in the end, you have to give yourself that time and that openness, right? Because what if you were so, what if you didn't give yourself the time to say, all right, maybe I need to rethink this? A lot of times we may be scared to make change, especially at the last minute. We may think that, making change is something that can affect our vision overall. So I love just hearing this story of how you decided to go with Stella and how it works now, right?
Absolutely. And to me, it just seems so natural. It seems right. It's hard to believe that, for all those years I was writing Stellar, Stellar this, Stellar said, and Stellar went. And, it just seems a little bit, even for me to say it, I'm tripping over my own tongue because Stella just seems so right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think that is something that people struggle with when they have an idea, is to move through and beyond the idea, because the idea that you may have initially and originally you know, doesn't mean that it is the one that is going to manifest itself at the end of the project, And so the idea is just the first kernel. And I think it takes a lot of iteration and a lot of rework to get to your final product. And you can't be afraid. And I can tell you that was one of my biggest struggles is to sort of let that process happen and to understand that is also part of the natural process. And if you let go and let in those ideas that are coming to you from different places, because what has been so phenomenal about this experience is that I have had the opportunity to work with so many wonderful solopreneurs, female entrepreneurs, female solopreneurs, and male too. But it seems like I have this amazing crowd or amazing team of women solopreneurs who, who I bring in at different times in the project and have been able to leave their mark on Stella Blue and make her who she is today. And if I had resisted some of those ideas and some of those thoughts, and it would be a very, very different product that we have right now. And I don't think it would be as captivating as the product we have today.
I agree. I think, trusting the process and trusting how the process evolves is something that a lot of us creatives need to get better at. It can definitely be a struggle. But I have a question for you.
Sure.
One of the things that I think a lot of creatives we often struggle with is the whole marketing aspect, right? You have this idea, what makes
Correct.
What makes it different, right? There's nothing like it per se, specifically out there on the market. How were you able to really market the Stella Blue character at the same time? What were some of the key things that you had to do from a business perspective so that you were actually successful? Because, let me rephrase that, because I think success can be defined in different ways. So let me ask you this.
Correct. Yeah.
What does success look like for you as an author? And what does success look like for Stella?
Well, success for me, to be honest with you, I will say, Marina, that I said this to my husband. If I don't sell not one book, the success for me was knowing that I had this idea and I pursued it to the very end, because it was only to be about my kids. And if I were only able to tell my story to them, then in my world, that was success. However, now we've pushed beyond that. And now we hopefully will be able to tell our story to thousands and to millions over time. And therefore, in some people's world, that would be success. But in my world, knowing that my kids have the story and the legacy of my history and that of my parents, that of their culture, that is already a successful, that's already a successful endeavor. But definitely, the biggest challenge that we all face when we have new ideas, how do we get the exposure that we're looking for? And in this space, it's a very crowded space, like many commodities. How do you stand out from the crowd? Well, we're very new at this. It's all quite new, but I think we're taking all the right steps. We've done done our marketing. We have a distributor. We are, exposing Stella through book fairs, book expos, et cetera, and so forth. Our biggest, project for next year is to be at the Bologna Book Fair in Bologna, which is actually where children's books and book buyers come to every year to look at, new series, new features, et cetera, and so forth. So that's our real big push for next year. And I think the issue is to try and look at different ways to differentiate your product from others. So, our packaging for Stella, when you buy it off our website, comes, in a beautifully packaged envelope. Because for me, the experience of if this is going to be, and I'm not saying it's the first book, obviously, a child is going to read, because no child's first reading experience is at 6. But if you're going to be introduced to Cellar Blue at 6, then we want it to be an experience. So we want that to be a memorable moment that hopefully one of the gatekeepers, whether it's a grandma or mom or aunt or whomever or dad, that the experience of literature now becomes something very memorable and special for a child.
I think that's so important too, right? Because a lot of times, I know for me, like I was a book worm. Like my mom, that's the one thing I always say to my mom. I'm so happy that she introduced the library to us. I kid you not. I think I must have read all the children's books in Orange Public Library growing up.
Exactly.
And I have a personal, like I don't know how to describe it, but I have a love for books that goes so deep. Like I actually cherish the actual physical book, because that's one of my earliest memories, was going to the library and going to all the library events and sitting down.
And sitting on the library floor. Yes, I used to sit on the floor or lie on the floor and read, Exactly.
And it's so important, and I think a lot of times we don't understand how, especially as young children, when you see those pictures, you're reading the words, they really start, it lays a foundation for your creativity, and it also lays a foundation for how you see the world. And like you, I also think I was that dreamer as a child, right? And I think that comes from the books that I read as well.
Oh, definitely. I can certainly relate to that. And so, I like I said, this is how we are trying to brand Sella. Not only in her story, but in her look and feel as a brand.
So what's the most surprising lesson you've learned about yourself throughout this whole journey?
Well, I've learned, that I always in my life, I've always seen myself as a risk taker. And I think that's comparative, because you look around the people who and you know, well, I would do this, and so-and-so would not do that. And I see that in the fact that, I've gotten up and I've moved country, and, these are things in my immediate circle, I'm not only talking about my parents, my sisters, but my friends. People were like, oh, here she goes again. There's that Alisia, packing her bags and going to another country. And so although I seem to be a risk taker, in my own right, I realize that, especially, launching this project, I'm a conscious and conscientious risk taker. That means I take risks having looked both ways, which I didn't realize about myself. I didn't realize how deliberate I can be about my choices and about where I'm going. And this is really, I've actually been stopped by my own sense of reserve to say, wow, you actually have the capacity to be rational and to stop and say, you know what, this may not be the right thing to do at the right time now. And I didn't know I had that ability. So that was something that I've learned about myself that I'm really happy I know.
So let me ask you this. What's your favorite book? Since you are an author, what's yours?
Well, to be honest with you, my favorite book is probably, I love a lot of old English books written, back, in that romantic period, I guess, So Sons and Lovers, I think, is one of my most favorite. Jane Eyre, the Bronte, one of the Bronte sisters. I live in that headspace, where it always ends. Well, it doesn't always end happily, but there's this air of being genteel, and there's this air of correctness. Put it this way. That has always intrigued me. So if you ask me what are one of my favorite adult books, then I would have to say the ones I've just mentioned. But I think my favorite children books would be, well, more modern day, I guess, like everyone else, probably the Harry Potter series, which I absolutely, ate up and loved and was waiting with bated breath for the next volume. But when I was a child, I just loved The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think, again,
Oh, I love that
fanciful.
too.
It's
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. On a picture book level, I mean, I think there's nothing better than The Cat in the Hat. Room on the Broom, which I just love because I'm a big fan of Julia Donaldson. The whole Madeline series, I think. And I think I get a lot of this, the inspiration for rhyme coming through with all three of the books that I just mentioned on a picture book level.
And, I want to ask you this because I don't know many children's books authors who are also women of color. What has it been like navigating the industry, as a woman of color? Is it something that you think impacts you and the way that, people perceive the book, or do you not see it as an issue at all?
Well, I'm not going to say I don't see it as an issue, but I'm also going to say that it hasn't, at least for me. I don't go out, marketing the book as a book for children of color by a woman of color. I think that in itself is a selling point, but I don't necessarily use it as my opener. And so, I don't know if that is, if that's impactful, if that's making a difference. I think when I meet people, and I've had the opportunity of meeting hundreds of people, in the last 6 months, and it's amazing to be able to do so. I think it's refreshing that at least, and I'm going to can only speak from the point of view of another Black woman to, a Black parent or whatever, they are relieved that the book has been written by a Black woman or by a person of color. Because much of what we see written about people of color not being written by people of color. And so we are being portrayed in a way that is, that is somebody else's reflection on who we are. And they're not always getting it right. And so I think that, like I said, the reaction has been extremely positive when people say, "Oh, you're the author," and and this is the character. And it's nice to know that it's coming from an authentic place.
Tell me when you feel like giving up, what's something that keeps you going? Because a lot of times we are, it's hard to stay motivated. It's hard to always see the light at the end of the tunnel when the beginning of the tunnel may be pitch black, right? So what's something that really keeps you motivated?
Look, I think what keeps me motivated, and it's true, there are days when you think, "Oh, goodness gracious, am I going to go forward here?" It's always knowing and believing that tomorrow can bring a new opportunity, and that answer to that question that you've thrown out in the universe, and you said, "Gosh, can somebody give me the answer to X, or can I find a person who is going to help me do, Y?" Knowing that tomorrow may bring that answer to you, or, get you ever closer to meeting that person who you think is going to open the door to, an opportunity through, our new path, or whatever it could be. That's what keeps you going. It's really knowing that tomorrow is unknown, but the unknown can be what you've been waiting for. I hope I've explained that, in a way that, in a way that makes sense. But really, that's what you have to believe. And if you believe, it's so funny. Somebody just said this to me a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know what I was talking to them about, whatnot. And the person said to me, do you know why children, see magic? Or because they believe.
Wow.
And those words, I swear to you, they struck me like, a hammer just fell on my head, because it's so true. Because they see magic because they believe. And so if you believe that, your answer will come, then you'll keep going. And that's what keeps me going, because I do believe in magic.
That was such a lovely way for us to segue to our lightning round. So this part of our interview, I'm going to give you a prompt, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. And remember, this is going in line with our whole dream driving metaphor. Okay?
Okay.
So the first word is park.
Swing.
Reverse.
Makeover.
Neutral.
Reflect.
Drive.
Forward.
Okay. So whenever I do this with people, they're always, sometimes they don't know what to expect, but it's always so interesting to hear everyone's responses, because I swear everyone has a different way that they hear that word and what it means to them. So it's really good to hear your responses.
Thank you.
So if you want to be a dream driver, you have to have the keys to success. So tell me 3 things that you think every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
Well, I think you need knowledge. And when I say knowledge, I think you need common sense. Knowledge to know when you're out of your depth and require help in other forms, or of expertise. I think that is really the key. Can't keep driving if you don't know or think you've got gas in the car. So, know that. I think the other thing that's really key is building and maintaining relationships. Because without those, you can have the most successful or the most innovative idea, and you can hope to get that out in the market. But if you haven't built and maintained key relationships, this is coming from somebody who's a communicator. So to me, relationships are really key. I think that, you're going to go nowhere very, very quickly. And the third one, I think, is to have and to be humble and to have humility, and know that you may not always be right. And know that your idea, like I said, may have come through you, but you're just the conduit. So understand that, you've been put there to serve the idea through others as well, and to be humble about it, and to bring people in to your fold and into your idea. I think those are the key.
Thank you so much. I hope our dream drivers enjoyed hearing your story and your advice. I know I did. And as somebody who, as a child, wanted to be an author and wanted to write books, I used to have picture books. I was such a crazy child. Like, I used to write so many stories. You know what's the good thing? I am a hoarder of my childhood journals, and I have books of illustrations I used to make. So I can definitely find some and maybe take some pictures or scan it in. But I was definitely that kid who thought I was gonna be, before J.K. Rowling came about. I had my own Harry Potter series. I had I had
Absolutely.
all these fancy worlds and stuff. But it's just so amazing to see how you're really able to how the Cella Blue character really embodies so much, and the impact that it will have when these children are able to read the stories and see the pictures and just experience the world of Cella Blue. So I'm wishing you so much success with this, and if there's any if there's ever any way that I can be of help, or tell our dream drivers how they can get the book if they want to order it.
Absolutely. Well, Cello Blue can be can be ordered through our website, which is www.celloblue.com. And, the book is also available at amazon.com and amazon.ca. And I should also let our dream drivers know that next year, Meet the Blues, Cello Blue and the Missing Key will be hitting retail stores in the summer of 2017.
That's exciting. I have a niece, so I'm definitely you may see an order coming in from the States from me. So I feel like this is something that she's learning she's 5, so she can't really read. Well, she's turning 5, I should say. So she's really 4. So she's just now learning, I think she knows like sounds and stuff, but she can't necessarily like read yet. So
no, but then it could be read to her until that day when she can read it for herself.
Yeah, and she's always creating worlds. I know this would be something that would really inspire her. To see someone who looks like her on the pages, I think is also important.
Well, that's true. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very important for children and their self-esteem, is to be able to see themselves reflected in literature and in books and in pictures, and in a positive and uplifting manner.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you said earlier, in not a magical way, right? Like there doesn't have to be some kind of supernatural power that they possess, but they really can just be themselves. And that's Correct. Something that I think...
And that's okay. Can you imagine? You are just perfect the way you are.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 51. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing Alisia share her dream driving story and her personal keys to success. Let me know what you think of today's episode. Log on to social across the board, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, @DreamsAndDrive. Send me a tweet, a message. Let me know if you loved episode 51 and what you really took away from today's episode. If you want today's show notes, just go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 51, and you can read more about Alisia there and get links to her work online. Last but not least, you guys, if you loved today's episode, or if you loved any other episodes before, if you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be so amazing. We're closing out the year, and it's just been so, I want to say overwhelming, but not overwhelming. It's just been so, so wonderful to see how much the podcast has grown since January, and to see how much our listenership has evolved and how everyone really takes something away from each episode. So go ahead and leave a review if you really, really loved today's episode or loved any of them, and just share this episode with a friend as well. I appreciate you all. Keep dreaming, keep driving, and we'll chat again in episode 52. Now, episode 52 is going to be a special one, you guys. It's going to be the thank you episode. It's going to be the last episode of the year. I have some treats for you, so make sure that you mark it on your calendars. Episode 52 is next.